and we are ready to start. My name is Tatiana Shalepko. I'm a Cambridge University Press ELT consultant, and today we're talking about teaching reading in the first grade of the new Ukrainian school. And my first thing to say would be about the certificates. You will receive your certificates in 1 or 2 working days after the event. You will get the thank you letter in which there will be a link to the feedback form. After filling out the feedback form, you will get a link to your certificate, to download your certificate immediately. So please save the link, otherwise you will have to fill out the form once again. And then you will download your certificate and you will need to type in your name yourself. So there are no mistakes or misprints. All right, what we're working on today. First, why do we read? How does reading work? How is it different in the first grade? How is it different, the beginning of reading from the reading skills generally? Some activities, actually a lot of activities to take away, and a Q&A session, if we have time. So my first question, why do we read? I will ask you to read the text now. And the question here, do you think it's possible to write the whole paragraph with no letter A? Okay, those who think no, please read the text that you can see on the screen. I guess you finished reading, and we all finished reading. Now, why do you think you read the whole text in front of you on this slide? What was the reason to read this text? To find A, exactly. Thank you, Natalia. That, thank you all. Yes, thank you, everybody answering. Exactly. We had a very specific task and it was fun. It was a challenge. It was a challenge to find letter A. But even though we didn't find it, we read the whole text, and the task was fun. So this is how we manage our reading tasks. There should be a very specific reason. Why should I read this text? What is my interest? Yeah, we as teachers, we always have this, I have to read this, I have to read this for work, I have to read this for my professional development and so on. But if we chop these tasks into smaller tasks, like find something specific. I'm reading this for something specific. And this is what will work with the children. And this is what works with us anyways. Okay. So my favorite thing now, I will ask you to go to slido.com, the website you can see on your screen. So you can take your phone and go to slido.com and enter these numbers. So you can type your answers and they will appear on the screen. The question is, where do we really use reading skills in real life? I will give it a few seconds while you're going at slido.com. You just type it in Google. We're having first answers. By the way, you can type more than one answer if you wish. Reading commercials, yeah, everywhere. That's my favorite. News, okay. Okay, someone is typing the code. You don't have to type the code here. Okay, news, letters in communication, reading information. Posts in social networks. Yeah, it's too true. Shopping, yep. Something practical finally. To read books, oh, and a smiley thing. Literature, traveling. Okay, I really admire the huge green word everywhere because that's true. We have information everywhere. Visual, text information, audio information, and so on. So reading okay. Ooh, at school, at the post, emails, mass media, manuals. Okay, thanks a lot. So we do use it a lot in our everyday life. That's true. But if we think about our students, when we tell our students, you need to read because in your future, you will have to read emails, you will have to read posts, you will have to read tickets for traveling and manuals to understand how something works. This is not very motivating. We do know that students will use reading skills in different ways, like reading textbooks and articles for their studies at the university, reports, manuals, memos, emails for their jobs, tourist brochures and guides in their free time. Yeah, that's something you already mentioned. Internet sites, the majority of which will continue to be in English for both work and pleasure. Of course, that is all true. But we also need to understand that all of these points require very different reading skills. And none of them, as you can see here, none of them require reading books. Yeah, because reading for pleasure is different than reading for information. And we have to keep it in mind that we don't need to ask students to read and understand every particular word in the text and perfectly memorize what's going on there or retell, because some of the texts are not really stories, yes? So we need to understand that reading for pleasure is a kind of reading that we don't really develop in our students. They develop it once they learn how to read. What we can do, we can only motivate reading for pleasure. But other types of reading for information, for professional or learning life, is different. It requires the skills that would be scanning the text, that would be looking through, as we did in the search of letter A. Yeah, I don't really remember what the text was about. I only remember that there was no letter A, and that was the point of this text. So be careful when you look at the text and when you think that this should be for pleasure and this should be for information. What is reading in general? I will ask you now to go to Slido again and choose what you think is true for you. You can choose several points. What you think is true. I will give it a few minutes. Once again, join at Slido and choose what you think is true. And I will remind you, several answers are possible or no answer is possible. That is interesting how it all changes. Okay, for those who are still answering, number one, we need to decode individual letters to read the words. Number two, the more words there are, the longer the text will take to read. Number three, we need to read all the words accurately in order to understand the meaning of the text. Number four, if we understand all the words in the text, we will understand the text. So we have number one at the first place, number two at the second place, number three, third, and number four, fourth, logically. All right, I will stop on these numbers and let's have a look at each statement closer. So decoding. You might have seen this before because I already did a similar webinar several times, but here you can see the text. This is the text written by some criminal in one of the Sherlock Holmes novels. Short stories, The Dancing Man. And this is exactly what it is, Dancing Man. This was the cipher that criminals were using, and Sherlock Holmes would be decoding this cipher. How did he do it? He used, he first put all the vowels and then the most frequently used words that would contain these vowels, because most of the words have vowels, yes, and they are repeated and there are less vowels than consonants. So there would be A, there would be I, E. So he first tried all of these and then was trying to understand all the words. In this case, decoding is very important because this is a code. And when we look at this, for example, we need to decode individual letters to read the words. What do you think is written here? You can type it in the chat. And I will be looking at your answers. What do you think is this on the slide? What is written here? A signature. I will tell you no. These are Mr. Krilk. Looks, that's closer. Okay. Name. No, it's not. Winston Churchill. It's not a name. I will give you a hint. It's not a name. Health. Location. So yeah, we can only sit down and have a guessing session on what is written here. But now let's have a look at the whole sentence. She's a natural teacher, and it was a pleasure, yeah. But what's the rest? To have, okay. Her with, yes, to have her with us. So this thing is not a name, is not a signature, not a location, and we can only decode what is written there in the context. So the very important thing for reading skill is to always have context. If we don't have some words connected to each other, it doesn't make sense what we read. Yes, so we don't really need decoding all the time. It is true that we need to understand the letters, but here we couldn't understand a single letter. We could only understand what is it from the context. So when you teach reading, even to the young learners, it is important that they read with sentences, even the small sentences. It's an apple. Yeah, my name is, and so on, but not particular words, because decoding is not reading itself. Okay. The next statement was, we need to read all the words accurately in order to understand the meaning of the text. I will ask you to read the text that you will see on the slide as fast as possible. Ready, steady, go. I think you're ready. So you could easily read this text, if we can call it a text, even though all the letters are mixed up. How is that? This is because we have prior knowledge, prior knowledge of the words and prior knowledge of how the words are connected. If those were separate words with a comma, we wouldn't be able to read it, because reading is important when it makes sense, when it gives you ideas, when it has the finished thoughts. So all the text in your textbooks need to have the finished thoughts. We can compare it to the text like when I was at school, when I was studying, we used to have really nice books, but we also had books in the library, the ones that were half in English and half like some Soviet books. And there would be very strange texts or dialogues that don't make sense and don't look any close to real life. that's how we learn how not to read. Yeah, when something doesn't make sense, then it doesn't master a skill of reading. The next one, if we understand all the words in the text, we will understand the text. I will ask you now again to try reading this text I just read in the chat. A funny comment. Okay, this one, C++ is a general purpose programming language, and so on. Now, we tried reading. It's possible to read. We understand all the words, most probably in this little paragraph. But to tell you the truth, I have no idea what is written here, because I don't know anything about C++ language. I don't know I don't have any knowledge on this topic. And while working with reading, students need to really have some background knowledge, because reading is both bottom-up and top-down process. Top-down process in the meaning that, okay, we need to understand words, we need to understand, we need to follow the letters in the words, we need to be able to decode, but at the same time, we need to have prior language to the topic to understand what exactly is written here. And if this text was about methodology of English or some literature piece, most probably we wouldn't struggle understanding it. But since we have no knowledge about it, we can't. And with students, when you ask your students to, for example, in the first grade, read a very simple text about, I don't know, very simple, but it's about physics. Yeah, it has all the simple words, but it's about physics. That would be quite difficult. They need to know something before they go to this text. And so it's really cool to link English and other subjects, so they can transmit their knowledge from, for example, science or natural studies to what they are learning in English. And the last one, the more words there are, the longer the text will take to read. I will ask you to read these 2 lines. And now tell me, which line was faster for you to read? I'll go to the chat. Second, yes. Why? Even though the words here are bigger, much bigger, if there is no connection between these words, it's not reading. And when we look at these reading training materials that have rat, hat, cat, and so on in a row, and then hop, knock, I don't know what other words, it doesn't master a reading skill at all. It only shows that, okay, this is letter O, and it sounds like O in these words. This is letter A, and it sounds like A in these words, and that's all. This is not reading skill, but finding the connections between the words and looking at the connections between the words, this is reading. And how did you read it so quickly? Because you didn't even look at the words, you looked at the whole sentence. You see the question mark in the end of the sentence, and you know, okay, this is a question. This is how your brain works. It looks at the question and it looks at the keywords, and the rest goes automatically. You already know, this is the meaning. This is the question about how fast I can read and understand this. And this is what we need to master within our first grade students. Okay. Sorry, let's go further. Now, to conclude with the first statement, we usually need to read and decode letters in order to read the words, particularly at the early stages of reading. Not later, yeah. We do not need to necessarily read every word accurately to understand the text, as you had with that funny text. When reading a text, we use our own world knowledge in order to access the meaning. So be careful, because in the first grade, students don't really have too much of the world knowledge. 4. The more clearly the words are linked together to make coherent sense units, and the more clearly sentences are linked to make coherent paragraph, the easier the text will be to read. Very important point for the first grade, even there. Now, when we think of beginning of reading, we need to raise phonemic awareness within our students. And you can see here on the slide, this is the word apple. And students of Chinese language, they don't learn letter by letter. Yeah, they don't really have letters. They have hieroglyphs. And this hieroglyph means apple altogether as one picture. And at the very early stages, sometimes we can ask students to learn not just reading, but sight reading, yeah, not reading letter by letter. Together with decoding letter by letter, we have to allow our students read the word as a whole, like apple as a whole, orange as a whole, banana as a whole. Yeah, and here you can use shapes with all the letters in these in these kind of oranges, apples, and other fruit, in this case, students see the letters, but they percept the whole word instead of reading letter by letter. And this is the skill of mastering understanding the concept first, and then knowing the decoding. Still, in the first grade, we need to keep these processes together. Yeah, decoding each letter and seeing the whole word, as we did in the last exercise. Now, when we think of the beginning of reading, there are several questions that teachers might ask themselves. Should I teach my students orally for a while, or should I start reading and writing? Should I use phonemic method, or should I use global reading method? Should I teach students names of letters or only sounds? Or what goes first? Yeah, should I use upper and lower case of the letters, or only lower case of the letters when we teach the letters? So these might be the questions that teachers think of when they start teaching reading. And my favorite, at what stage should I teach the conventional order of the alphabet? So yes, regarding the first question, should I teach students orally or should I go into reading and writing? When we think about how we learned our native language, how we acquired our native language, we didn't start reading and writing and speaking and listening all at once. We need to remember that there is a very important rule for every language. Listen before you speak, speak before you read, read before you write. So it goes in the order, and especially we need to remember it at the very beginning of our teaching. First, you teach your students orally for a while. You don't have to go into reading and writing at once. Students need to get used to the language, to the spoken language. They need to hear this language a lot. Then they need to try to reproduce this language. And after reproducing, they might go to reading and then producing written language somewhere at the end of the first year. Not at the end, but starting from the second term of the first year, which is normal. And if your students in the first grade, in the first few months, do not write some letters or read a lot of texts, it's okay, because this is how people naturally acquire the language. It might be a bit difficult to switch to this mode, and especially to explain their parents why their children are not reading and writing all at once. But this is a very natural process. And once we start breaking this nature of communication, students later on will have language barriers. They will have problems with motivation of studying English and many other things. So psychologically, it is much better if students first listen a lot and then try to speak, and only then go to reading and writing. And actually the new Ukrainian school program is designed this way, that the first half a year, nobody has to read and write all at once. Another one, learning new alphabets should begin with learning single letters, starting with the most common and useful. This is the phonic method. So we don't teach students A, then B, then C, and so on. The first letters to be taught are usually A, T, S, the ones that are the most frequently used. When we come back to the story with Sherlock Holmes and the dancing man, we remember that he managed to decode that cipher because of the most frequently used letters. And that's exactly the process that we call the phonic method. So first we go with B, D, T, A, S, E, and so on. And only somewhere at the end, we would go to Q, to W and Z, and TH, diphthongs, digraphs, and SH, CH digraphs would go prior to Q and Z, for example, because they are used not so frequently in the spoken language. This is the recommendation. You don't have to follow it strictly, but this is the recommendation of how to make the process of reading and learning phonics natural. Okay, names of letters. This is less useful for reading. We don't need to know names of letters at once. For example, when I was studying, I had quite a year of confusion when we learned all the A, B, C, D, E, F, G, and then I look at the word and I remember, okay, this is G. How come it's a pig? And you understand what I'm talking about. For us, for adults and teachers of English, it sounds absolutely normal that G goes in a word as G, but for students, especially those who have Ukrainian language first, it would be quite a hard thing to understand. So don't go into the names of letters before you learn how they sound in the words. And lower and upper cases are taught all together, all at once. So capital A and just A would go together in one process. When and why do we teach alphabet? Before we go to answering this, how to really justify learning of the alphabet order? What is the practical use of knowing alphabet? I will ask you to type that in the chat. Okay. To use dictionaries. I've got it here. What else? Spelling your name. Yeah, that's a good one. Address book in the first grade. Daria, thank you for that. Using dictionaries and starting with vowels and going to frequently used consonants. Information at the hotel, again, for the first grade. And nowadays, I don't really remember when was the last time I opened a real dictionary. Really, I understand, like I have some nostalgia to the dictionaries, but I don't really have any these days. I use, I even, if it's Cambridge Learner's Dictionary, I use it only on my mobile phone, and I don't think dictionaries will go much into the future for everyday use. So yeah, to spell the words, to spell the name, yes, I agree here. But to make some registration at the hotel, doing reports, data analysis, and so on. This is something from the very serious and adult world. And we don't really need alphabet in the first grade. This might be, at some point, this might be confusing. If we start with the alphabet, it might be confusing with the names of the letters. So our recommendation is to go into alphabet after you learned the sounds, because the names of the letters, A, and especially my favorite W, the names of the letters are not very important at the early stages and might be even harmful for understanding pronunciation of some of the letters in the phonics method. So first, go to the most frequently used phonics, and then maybe alphabet would be there to summarize their knowledge of the letters and learn the song to celebrate that they learned all the letters, how they sound in real language, and what they look like, and how to write them as a celebration, but not beginning with the alphabet. Even though it's very fun and everybody likes the alphabet songs, it might be confusing at the very early stages. Maybe you could go there in the middle. Phonics song, perfect. Only if it makes sense, like the one with fat rat in a black bag or something that makes sense. Okay. Now, when we look at some tasks, there should be look and say. You don't have to read all at once, but when you see the word, you need to understand, you need to know how to say this word, and that could be done with the cards. Sight reading, again, understanding the word, what it looks like on the card or in the word. Then flashcards with high frequency words should be somewhere there. You can make them all together. That can be arts and crafts lesson, where you make the most frequently used words. And yeah, include phonemic awareness wherever you can. All right, something doesn't work. Now, with the word cards, what else you can do? There should be sight words, and there should be print awareness, how the words look when they print it. And when we saw that it was a pleasure to have her with us. Also, handwriting important, but also handwriting is not something that we really need to teach at the English lessons. We need to remember that in the first grade, the first thing to teach is motivation to learn English and communication. Writing and reading takes the second place. It used to be different when we were studying. It used to be different even 10 years ago, but we need to go into the new world and new generations, where the first thing goes first, and it's communication, first of all. Communication and critical thinking. And being able to name a letter and being able to give the order of the letters in the alphabet is not a life skill. We have to accept this truth and see how we can work with the new truths. Now, still, I'm not saying that this is the only possible way. It's all integrated. It's just we don't have to be focused on writing and reading letters in the first grade. Now, with the word cards activities, we can work with simple recognition, like run to the word, run to the letter, point at the letter. We can build the word trials. We can relate a word to a picture, play games like Pelmanism, ordering, reordering, recycling, and revising these letters all the time in some fun way. With the letter recognition, it might be really necessary for some students, the writing letters, knowing the basic patterns of the letters, tracing the shape, and writing the letters down. But it's an extra activity. Don't focus on this activity as the main one. Yeah, don't give too much of the lessons, too many of the lessons to this activity. Word shapes, also a great activity. You can play that on the blackboard or whiteboard to develop the sight reading. And phonics, it teaches the regular patterns. And as you saw here, for example, bus, cab, run, there are patterns like that, and I will show you on some other examples. And actually, there are 500 high-frequency words, and 500 words is not that many, and it's actually all we use in spoken language in everyday life. And it's easier when we learn them in the context again. Now, I will look how much time we have left. Ooh, not very much, 5 minutes or so. So yeah, teaching reading is an integrated process which requires phonics, listening, whole word reading, simple writing, and decoding, I would add here as well. Now, you need to follow the natural order. So if we start reading, we can start with shared reading, reading all together when the teacher reads and students follow, guided reading, and we do this before progressing to independent reading. And this is something we build up the whole year. So shared reading. Before we do the shared reading, students need to know all the words in the text and what they look like from the cards or from the posters in the classroom. And they need to know how separate letters sound and how they sound in the words. Yeah. In the shared reading, teacher reads stories for comprehension skills similar to listening, but students can follow that and get used to the reading. And another way of shared reading, teacher goes first, children go second, like a story time or a song follow-up. And yeah, guided reading when a teacher controls the process. Now, going to phonics, what is phonics? It's the relationship between the spoken and written language. It's like the alphabet is a code for it. And phonics requires recognizing sound spelling patterns. It is taught in steps and phases throughout quite a long time, not all at once. Phase 1 is about the quality of the sound. It can be loud, it can be soft, it can be long and short, with the percussion, and we can use onomatopoeic words here, like clap, knock, yeah, and so on. I have squeak here, knock, ding, crunch, moo. This is onomatopoeic words that are really easy to connect with the concept, and they can work really well when you start teaching phonics. And what we model to young learners on this stage, we model whether the sounds long or short, whether some of the sounds are voiced or not voiced, and how we blend sounds to make the words. And when we read, sounds are represented by symbols. The phase 2 is the letter sound. It's connected, and it's already the beginning of reading. And the letter sound is different from the letter name, and we need to remember that. And we first teach letter sound and then teach letter name. Yeah, there are different ways of introducing this sound. I will omit this one, but we start always with reference and repetition. Like here, we have references on the picture, and there is audio track that asks students to say the words, to repeat the words after them, and then there is a song or a chant where students repeat these words in some connected way. And phonics is used in this chant. There are, in Superminds Ukrainian edition, at the end of the book, there are also phonics sections. In these phonics sections, which don't go A, B, C, D, they go in the frequency of the letters used in spoken language. So here, students can train their understanding of the sound, first of all, and then in the last task, they can point and name the letters. So I'm not saying that we don't need to know the names of the letter by the end of the year, but it's not the first task to do. Yeah, the first task to do, like A for apple, and then at the very end, name the letter A. And we can introduce that at the end. And yeah, there should be a lot of independent practice with phonics and with letters. And we can have fun activities created by the students themselves. For example, here on the ring, students add the letters they've learned, they've seen in the words a lot. They create this flip book by themselves, and they add new letters once they learn them to this ring. And this could be a really fun activity for your students as a very small portfolio, which they can bring somewhere with them. And yeah, there should be also critical thinking development while teaching letters. Another activity would be creating a hand watch or a funny cap with the letters. Like today we are practicing B in different ways, and some of the students can wear these funny caps. Yeah, here I have watch with the drawings that students can make themselves, or you can print them out and cut them out, as the primary teachers always do, a lot of arts and crafts. Tracing the letters can be fun if we use some other materials, especially for students with the physical and kinesthetic intelligence. And students in the first grade, they really need to touch things to learn them. And yeah, so they can create letters and make letters out of some different materials like plasticine. Yeah, they can have different types of activities and create those activities on their own. Another way of learning phonics can also include realia. We can have a phonics bag with different items for a specific letter, like car would be for phonics A, but letter A, yeah, which is different. And then at the same time, there is snake, there is and that's it. Yeah, snake and car, the same letter, different sounds, and the students can categorize things according to the phonics. I will omit this. And yeah, there is also reading practice in the Superminds Ukrainian edition, a lot of reading practice with the pairs, phonics pairs. And here it is introduced, like dig, pig, tin, pin, and so on. Some words that sound the same, kind of, with only one difference. And there is always, there is always a phonics sentence that helps students learn how the words sound. through the context. You can also play bingo, reading the words and students crossing them out and shouting out bingo. And this is a phonics bingo. Another activity, how many words can you make out of these consonants and these vowels? So I can make cat, bat, sun, bed. Even though students might not know the words, they can create them and try to read them and then check whether all of the words they created are real words. But you need to warn them about it. Friendly pairs, I already showed you some of the friendly pairs like dog, frog, hot, pot, and so on. There can be also a game where students try to remember as many words as possible going with these letters. In the phase 3, there would be digraphs, trigraphs, split digraphs, alternative spelling, and more tricky words. When I'm telling there are 3 phases, I do not mean that this is what we have to teach all at once. Even in one lesson, we can use 3 of these phases. And throughout the whole process of learning English, for 10 years, there will be these 3 phases. First with the simpler words, then with the trickier words. For example, we don't go to letters Z and Q, as I mentioned before we learn some of the digraphs or diphthongs, as we call them. We learn TH and double O before we go to W and Z, for example. And you can see it here. For this, I have a fun activity, which is called Corner Game. So what we need to do, we put 2 papers on one piece of paper. It is written CH, on another SH, and we put them in different corners of the room, if we're in the room, of course, and we read out the words. And we have students in 2 teams. One team is CH team, another team is SH, and they have to go to the corner which they hear. Chicken, and then CH team goes to the CH corner, and SH team doesn't do anything. Then sheep, they go to this corner and they activate themselves somehow, and then in the corners they can raise their hands whose team is sounding now, and so on. Or you can do it with the whole class if you have the possibility of going from one corner to another corner in the class, and it's also a great total physical response activity. Now, finding, circling the words, one of my favorite activities of all the times, and we have a lot of that in the books. And there are some other ideas. I will just give you a little touch of those, and most probably will continue at some other webinar if we need continuation of the phonics topics. For example, there is a drama activity. Say I sound and show. Big, pin, big, dig, and you have to mime that. Yeah, and students there is a student who mimes, but you start with yourself to model it. Yeah, you show, I don't know, the big, you show the pin, and of course students need to know the words before they can guess it. But still, miming games are really good for students to shout out the words in a natural way, so they have the reason to say these words. And you can go further and play with some contexts. Yeah, big or big wins something, and so on. So yeah, students can continue this game in the groups once you model it and once you played it several times already. Be ready that it will not work all at once. And there can be different matching activities, like matching the letter with the capital letter, or the letter with the picture, or all together. And this can be a warm-up activity at the beginnings of the lessons. And of course, yeah, you can use stickers that can be hanging somewhere in your classroom, especially when students have problems pronouncing them. You can work with stickers. And to wrap up, start teaching letter sound associations from the very first day. Separate sound from spelling, because these are two different activities. They all concern reading, but they are not reading really. Recognize the sound environment. Watch out for native language interference. You can use native language when you give instructions, not when you model, but when you give instructions, you can do that. But in pronunciation, be very careful not to have native language interference with students as well. Try to make this natural English-speaking environment from the very first day. Provide opportunities for practice more than presenting the language, and you need to have an aim to decipher the code. So there should be an aim for every reading activity. And if you haven't seen yet, you can look into Supermind's Ukrainian edition. We have the samples on the Publishing Linguist UA website. There is a student's book, workbook samples, teacher's book sample, and coming soon, Super Phonics book and Super Practice book for more practice at the lessons. And yes, these are the materials that you can see at our Publishing Linguist website. You can also read articles that we publish I guess now there will be every week. Check them out at our Linguist UA website. And thank you.